Good morning, Upper Sixth. So here we are. There's loads of stuff that I've done for paper 3, so I'm not going to repeat any of it. But one thing that we've practiced in class a little bit is essay questions with a supply and demand diagram in it. This has only been tested once, ever, and doesn't mean it won't be tested again. Most of the essays we would do don't include, obviously, supply and demand diagrams or break-even diagrams or anything like that. The examiners are not trying to catch you out, but they've tested this style of question before. So we'll look at it from the perspective of an 8 marker and a 12 marker, and we'll see. So this is from today's Times. You can pop online. I've obviously updated the article so it fits into a case study, and this lovely chart was in there. I've not used this in the essay, but what a wonderful opportunity to talk about trends. Now you need to remember that I'm estimating here that your exam paper for paper 3 was written about here. Now if you get a Marks and Spencer's question versus next, if I was a betting man, but you never know, we can see that rock bottom before they were down there. Okay, so October 2022 was not actually great. Things started to improve. You might see case studies around about this period here as they're starting to improve. Maybe they're implementing some of their more trendier fashion lines. Maybe they've upped their food offer, which is having that cross-promotional benefit. People are going into the supermarkets to buy more of their brilliant food, and they might walk out with, I don't know, this outfit that she's wearing. So you need to think about that. Maybe it's because they've focused more on food and not fashion, that actually going into the supermarket is not so much about buying clothing anymore, but they've really upped their game online because of the trend of moving online. There's so much you can do with this, but this is sort of a MOPS case study, because from when the exam paper was probably written, roughly around about here, we can see their share price has been going up. And what a wonderful upward trend we see most recently. Okay, shareholders are very happy. You'll see that from the case study. I'm not going to do a question on that data extract, but it's worth mentioning in context with what could possibly come in the paper next week. So here are the past paper questions to do with supply, demand and the markets. Don't look into that too much. Thinking, oh, they've never asked a question there, we're definitely going to get one. Realistically, when you ask a supply or a demand question, you start talking about the markets, don't you? So maybe they'll directly assess it, maybe. If not, it'll be merged into it. So we're looking for supply and demand diagram questions to do with essays. Now, if you look through all of these, we can see 2 reasons why. 8 marker, and we've got an 8 marker in there, and up here we have got the same question. Okay, so this was the research theme for paper 3 2020. You would have probably already read the examiner reports and you'll know that there's not actually a lot in them. I wonder why. Something to do with a global pandemic and working from my shed. So think about this. It's an undertested exam paper. We've seen it once before, and there's some good comments that we can see from the chief examiner, which we will go through. Other than that, we've got a collection of questions without diagrams, or we've got 4 marker draw questions. Okay, you're not going to get a 4 mark draw question next week because there are no 4 markers. Doesn't mean you won't get an 8, 10 or 12 with a diagram in it. And if they were really mean, they put one in a 20 marker, but can't really see that, but you never know. So here is the question, and as we can see, lifted this from the examiner report this morning, and this will be, once I put it up on the screen, a good answer. Okay, can't see much else in the examiner report other than a bit of commentary. But if we look at the question here, it's the obvious start. So we see using, which means I must, or I'm going to get my marks capped. Assess 2 reasons why live entertainment business revenues in the UK might have increased. So I'm going to need to demonstrate an understanding of revenues. I'm thinking about why they might have increased. So I'm looking for the evidence of how, so if I'll put a bit of app there, I'm looking for that application from the case study. I'm not just going to say they increased. Hopefully I can do a bit of maths chucked in there. But remember, it's an 8 marker. And because this was the first year we've ever seen a supply and demand diagram in an 8 marker, my advice to you is draw the supply and demand diagram quickly and then write an 8 marker. If they test it this year, then we'll have obviously a huge sample, we'll have great guidance from the chief examiners, but the only guidance we've got is the stuff that I'm about to show you. Based on that, my advice is quickly draw a diagram and write an 8 marker. You shouldn't be writing much about the 8 marker anyway. My worry is that some people might procrastinate over this, spend 15 minutes on perfecting what is only an 8 marker, and then they leave the 20 marker blank at the end of the paper, or more likely the second 12 marker. So let's hope that doesn't happen. So here's the comments from the chief examiner. Well drawn and labelled. Well, we know that needs to happen. We've done loads of these at 4 markers. And also we're mentioning this in our essay to some extent. They start with a clear definition of revenue. Top tips, start with a definition, always gives you those foundations, and identifies one factor of income. Okay, so they're using the case study, all the stuff that you would know to do. The student has gone on to examine a second factor, advertising, and explains why the increase in demand, then provides balanced argument, that's the however, using the context. Now we know that our 8 markers need to have 2 points. Okay, so whichever version your teacher has taught you will be roughly the same as the one that all the rest of us teach, because we use the examining body. We're not making stuff up. So we've got 2p however paragraphs. To start off with, you should really do a bit of a definition. That might be in your first sentence of your first p, but you need to define the key term in context or show an understanding according to the standards, or you're going to get 0 marks. We do not need a conclusion. Okay, we do need 3 chains of argument, and it's very important that we obviously do not write the conclusion. You're not going to get marks for it. We don't need that final judgment. So here is the extent of their diagram. Looks okay to me. And I've not memorised the case study, but I'm guessing there's evidence in the case study of more consumers buying something, because this obviously represents the total amount of consumers at any given time and their willingness to pay at a certain price. Consumers will want to pay as minimum as they can get away with in general, not always, whereas suppliers will always want to charge the most they can. Well, if there's a limited supply here with a bit more demand, according to the rule of supply and demand, this is now illustrating more consumers and they're in competition with limited supply. So the equilibrium goes up to there. So you would get 1 mark for drawing the L with the P and the Q, 1. Then X marks the spot with your demand and supply correctly labelled. And we know that that is D for downwards curve as well as demand. So we can't get those round the wrong way. Put your first P and Q in, and then shift. Quite a lot of the time, if I'm considering if it's a supply or a demand shift, I will use my pen without drawing, and I might rest my pen there. If there's evidence of the price or quantity demanding going up, then actually resting my pen there, that makes sense. Then I'll draw my curve. I might have rested my pen there, and I see that quantity goes down and price goes down. If that's conflicting with the case study, then it's the wrong way. I might be having a bit of a wobble thinking, is this supply? Well, if I put the supply curve shift in there, because you only ever do 1 shift in business, so if I do a supply curve shift, well, that actually lowers price. So maybe that's conflicting information. And if I go the other way, price, yeah, we can see what happens if we're moving our supply curve up there, but actually the quantity demand goes down. Yeah, and we've got my increased. So UK revenues have increased. Well, if they're selling more, and they're selling more price, well, it's definitely increasing, isn't it? You can sense check these things and remember positive marking. And if you don't know what that is, go and speak to your teacher. So here is the essay. I'm not going to walk right the way through it, but we can see it starts off with a very good definition. We can see that they have learnt good essay technique. They've left a space between it. Then, however, Mr. or Mrs. Examiner, here comes my counter argument. I love how they've used the language of the question. Up here, 2 reasons. Here, 1 reason, another reason. It's quite easy, isn't it? Now, they were clearly starting to run out of space. They've written quite a lot here, but look how they've put quotation marks around the evidence. What a wonderful technique. By using quotation marks, you remember to use the evidence, okay? And here, they were obviously running out of space. They couldn't stick it on another line. We've got another however. Okay, it's a lovely answer. Chief Examiner was being a bit picky maybe, but they still gave it full marks. Okay, happy days. Let's move on. So here is a very similar question based on today's news. So using a supply and demand diagram, so we've got to demonstrate an understanding and we need to use it, which means I'm also going to talk about it in my essay. Okay, and I don't like writing economics essays in business, but actually some of the techniques and the language moving from D to D1, those sorts of things are very important. So assess the likely benefits. Well, we know that we're going to do benefit however, of Marks and Spencer's improved perception of fashion style on its overall sales. So we've got the classic of, on, so we know what our hook is. The hook is on overall sales, and we will make sure that our chains of argument come back to sales. But we're not going to be a lazy TikTok student. We are going to have sales in context, hopefully. And we don't want to see those automatic profits and sales, every single thing, because that's going to end in a C or a D grade. And if you want that grade, then fine, just do autopilot. If you want to use the case study, well, you'll improve your grade. So we know it's an 8 marker, we're not going to write a conclusion. Now, before I go to the case study, in this case, I'm going to draw the first 2 stages of the supply and demand diagram. I'm just going to get it out of my system because I then can remind myself of what these things mean. I'm also going to write a definition. Now, because I've got supply and demand diagram I'm going to draw, that's demonstrating an understanding of that. The only other thing I need to define really is sales. And I'm going to link that into probably revenue, unit sales and stuff like that. We've got perception of fashion style in there, and I might put a question mark or an app next to that to remind me to find evidence of that in the case study, because that's clearly my context, isn't it? But first of all, I'm going to draw my diagram. I'm going to draw it quite small because of the restrictions of space I've got. Looking at the past paper from 2020, they'll give you a box to draw it in. Maybe draw a nice big diagram so they can actually read your labels properly is my advice. So we've got an L, yeah, we like L's, and we're going to put P and we're going to put Q. We've got 1 mark. X marks the spot, especially when we're little pirates. And we're then going to understand that this curve is pointing downwards. Last time I checked, demand and down begin with a D. The other one must be the supply. Okay, that's 2 marks. There's no excuse for not getting at least 50% of the marks in these 4 markers in paper 1. But at least we've got some knowledge marks. We're then going to put in our tidy-ish lines, and we're going to call that P1 and we're going to call that Q1. Now, we're not going to get any extra marks for that at the moment, but it's a nice tidy diagram, and I need to find out, is this more or less customers? Maybe they're coming from Next to M&S, maybe they've suddenly decided they need to wear clothes. Or is this more or less supply? This could be Marks and Spencer's supply, it could be supply in the industry, it could be new shops opening up, it could be something like that. We've got to remember this is a short-term diagram. So you're looking for step 1. Don't confuse this. This case study is actually relatively confusing. It's not been written by an examiner, that's why. They would have stripped all the confusing stuff out of it. I've just rewritten something from the Times. So in the case study, it does mention something about demand, something about supply. You need to sort of think about what order they're in. Okay, what comes first? Short term. This is not a long run diagram in economics. Okay, quite important. We're then going to write our definition, because by writing our definition, I know what I'm looking for in the case study before I even read the case study, to be honest with you. And remember what the Chief Examiner said. It started well with a well-defined term. If that's what they're looking for, kids, let's give the examiners what they're looking for, hey? Because then they'll give you what you're looking for on results day. Sales directly influence revenue, which is calculated by the number of units sold multiplied by the price of the unit. Okay? We've got overall sales up here, and that's what we have defined. Okay, that's a K. We're then going to go to the case study, and we're going to look for some lovely data. This is an 8 marker. We don't want to get too excited about this. We've already got some work up here. We've done a bit of a definition there, and we've got 10 minutes to do this from start to finish. This reading the question and sticking a couple of letters next to it, so at least I've got a plan and a hook so I know what to end my chain of argument on, that's going to take you, I don't know, 30 seconds to a minute. You're going to autopilot and throw down the first 2 steps of your supply and demand diagram. You're then going to write your definition of sales. You're then going to go to the case study and you're going to identify between 2 and 4 pieces of evidence. The reason I say 2 to 4 is your howevers must be contextualized or you ain't getting the marks. Okay, textbook abstract rubbish howevers will not get you the marks. Okay, look back in the video at the comment from the Chief Examiner. Even though they gave it 8, they were going, yeah, well, it might not be really 8. Okay, and that's probably because of the balance with those howevers. You can have a look through it and decide. So there's lots of information. We're looking for sales. We're looking for this perception of fashion style. Pause the video, read the case study, and identify, is this an increase in demand, more consumers, or is this an increase in supply, more supply or suppliers? Then think about your evidence for that in context with perception of fashion style. You should have paused the video. Did you pause the video? No. So, 8 marker. I'm going to put this into the P structure for you. You all know how to write these things. You clearly would not be writing that. M&S improved perception of fashion style is likely to increase demand for its fashion products. Okay, very textbooky. We've got fashion in the question. So far that is not context. It's just a repeat of the question, even though I've put it in the sentence twice. It's not application. So we need at least 3 chains of argument, and it would be nice if it's in context. And if not, what we're going to do is we're going to describe what's going on in the supply and demand diagram, and then when we come to the evidence section, hopefully there's a little cheeky, this could be interpreted as, or the case study insinuates, or something like that. As M&S's fashion style is perceived more positively, more consumers will be attracted to its clothing. Clothing, fashion, limited application, hey? This increase in attractiveness leads to higher demand, shifting the demand curve to the right. Hang on. So our evidence and now our chain of arguments talking about what I should have done in the diagram. Consequently, at the same time, price levels, consequently, at the same price level, M&S will be able to sell more units of fashion items, increasing overall sales and revenue. So they could sell it at the same levels and sell more, or if we shift that curve, I'm going to put D1 there, I'm going to put D2 there, I'm going to put in my little dots. Okay, we can call that Q2, and we could, because the equilibrium price is high, you see. So hopefully we're going to talk about that a little bit later, because so far we're saying at the same price we can sell more stuff. So we've got 1 mark for application for shifting that and interpreting the case study. And then because we've changed the quantity and the price, we get our analysis mark. Okay, so however they're going to allocate the marks, It will be in obviously a marking grid, not like how I've just described it, which is using 4-mark language. But actually, we've talked about some analysis just by drawing the diagram. Let's see if they tested this year. Evidence for this. This is seen in the statement, improving style perception helped double the numbers of under 30 lingerie customers, achieving a 38% market share. Okay, we've got overall sales up here as the hook. We have got doubling the number of this specific demographic, and they've increased their market share. Well, if we know the calculation for market share, we understand that's directly linked to sales. In this case, lingerie, but overall clothing. Okay, again, to remind you, you wouldn't write that in the sentence. The examiners don't need your help marking. However, it'd be nice if there's a comma there instead of that, but never mind. M&S introduced 1,300 new product lines, which, if not managed well, may lead to supply chain pressures, requiring M&S to manage its inventory more effectively to avoid stock outs and overstock situations. So this is textbook. Yeah, so we know that they've introduced new lines, and yes, this is more in the future, according to my answer. So the answer is focused on demand. Actually, the however is, because they're adapting to this demand, maybe they've introduced all these new lines, and go careful. Now, in class, we've discussed what Marks & Spencer's did a few years ago. Unfortunately, they got it wrong with their sales forecasting of a new and exciting line. They ordered it cheap from China. They got in this lovely new range of summer wear, and it sold out within literally a couple of weeks. And even though the summer is terrible in the UK, it normally lasts more than a couple of weeks. Lots of unhappy customers. Because of that, they've got a more agile supply chain now, and actually stuff that might be classed as more dynamic they make in places like Spain and Portugal, and the stuff that's easy to forecast they still make in places like China. Okay, interesting supply chain question that we could have asked. Now, the next point. Improved perception of fashion style can allow Marks & Spencer's to charge higher prices for its products. Okay, now this is illustrated in the diagram, yeah? Okay, we're talking likely benefits. So to improve this, I think, I might say one benefit is, another benefit is, a bit like the one we saw from the past paper question, which started those off really nicely. I really liked that one. Now, so we've got this higher prices. It's in context with the diagram, which is what I'm trying to explain. As consumers perceive M&S fashion products to be more stylish and desirable, that's sort of an interpretation, the company gains the ability to charge premium prices. Okay, a bit of PED knowledge coming in, who would have guessed it? This is because consumers are willing to pay more for the products they consider fashionable and high quality. A little bit of a repeat, stylish, desirable, fashionable, high quality, but it was done under time conditions. The shift in the demand curve, we're now describing what we've drawn, to the right increases the quantity sold and can raise the equilibrium price. Good use of knowledge and language from the unit, hey? Further boosting M&S's overall sales and profitability. We're back to the hook. Okay, so in class we've put an and next to that. I've not done all the application and chains of argument there, but it's coming back to the hook. We need to make sure we're answering the question, which is quite important. Very important. Now we need to make sure that this is contextualised, because actually this is very much recall and a bit of a description of what's going on in the diagram. Now, describing the diagram will probably be classed as a bit of application, but we're not going to risk it, are we? Because we're still going to write this in 10 minutes, but we're going to use the case study. This is seen, what a lovely term, this is an interpretation, sort of thing we'd love to see in 12 and 20 markers, with 80% of clothing and home sales at full price and significant growth in specific fashion segments. Okay, so well contextualised. Let's have a look at the however, see if there's any context in that, see if we can take away a mark for it not being contextualised. This one, nice context, yeah? However, high prices might deter some price-sensitive customers, potentially reducing sales volume in the long term if competitors like Next offer similar products at lower prices. Now, when I wrote this, I thought to myself, that's abstract. It's a nice argument, but it's abstract. I just threw a bit of Next in there, so we've got some contextualised about competitors. Now, probably enough to be honest with you. Next isn't in the question. Next is definitely one of their competitors in the UK, so I think that's contextualised really. Now, what do you think we should write as a conclusion? Yes, that's a trick question because we don't have conclusions with 8 markers, so please don't write them. Yeah, let's move on. So obviously all we're really interested in is it full marks? Is it level 3 in this case? We're not looking for perfection, but it would be nice to get full marks on these. They're normally quite easy. And remember, if you get full marks on your 2 8 markers, that's 16%. Yeah, so remember, P, let's make that a bit bigger, eh? Q, 1 mark. X marks the spot, D for down and demand. S for the other one, 2 marks. No excuse. So we'll put Q1 there, P1 there. And then remember, we decided that more customers were buying from them, and we've seen the reason why, and we've given some lovely evidence. So obviously we would only draw this once in the exam, but it's quite nice to just quickly draw one. Now I'm drawing this on a screen. I'm sure you can draw this a lot faster in your paper. Okay, we've got some marks there. Is it accurate? Of course it is. Is it well contextualised? Even the howevers, Dobby, come on now. Are there a minimum of 3 chains of argument? Because we don't really need 5. The way that I've written the evidence, if you count them, I've probably written 5 by accident, but at least it answers the question and it's in context, hey. Is it balanced? Well, without my howevers, it wouldn't be balanced. And if those howevers were not contextualised, you're not going to get a mark for it. If you don't contextualise one of your howevers and everything else is perfect, you're probably going to get a mark taken away. If you don't contextualise either of them, or you forget to write your howevers, you're going to be down in the level 2 area. Okay? If it's not balanced, it's not balanced. So go very careful. Unbalanced, unlikely to show competing arguments. Okay, so we've got that. Remember, if it says, there's no conclusion. Okay, now what I'd like you to do now is transform it. I want you to think about a conclusion and a justification for this. We've got a 12-mark structure here. We just need to write a conclusion and a future-orientated justification. It's exactly the same conclusion that we would write for a 10-marker and a 20-marker, really. And we've been practicing using future-orientated MOP statements to support our justification. Okay? Whilst you're thinking about that, I'm going to quickly draw this diagram. D for down and demand. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance in that time to write a conclusion. Now you need to remember, we've looked at past paper, examiner reports before, and we had a bit of a reminder from the chief examiner in a recent video that said, remember 4 marks of a 12 marker are to do with your conclusion. So you need to make sure, what he said about evaluation actually, so you need to make sure that you actually invest as much time in your conclusion as in one of these points. Okay, we need context. We need slightly something a bit extra, and the future-orientated MOPs will help us. So, overall, I do like an overall to make sure we're answering the question. Marks and Spencer's improved perception of fashion style is likely to significantly benefit the overall sales. Now, remember, we would have had our hook up there. Obviously, there's a K next to that. We know that we need to demonstrate that one as well. And it's the classic of, on, for our link to our overall hook. We've already defined what sales are, and that's what we've based most of our stuff on. Before I've written my conclusion, I quickly go back, I look at the word hook, and it says sales. Now we know it's about likely benefits, and we're thinking overall benefit for the sale. It's not exciting, but it sort of answers the question. Now with benefit style questions, I do like to bring attention to probably the most important benefit here, because it sort of adds a little bit more to it. It's still not that exciting, but quite nice. The most important benefit is potentially to boost revenue through higher sales volumes and premium pricing. Okay. In a previous video, we talked about Next and how their profit forecasts were wrong and they actually got more profit in. They said it's because they charged more full prices. Marks and Spencer's are saying exactly the same thing. Just remember your price skimming, hey? Doesn't mean you have to bring their price down at a certain time. You would monitor the last possible opportunity that you can charge full price, and then you might need to lower your price in the future. Two big fashion retailers that have talked about price skimming and how it's directly linked to profitability. Okay? Maybe we see a premium pricing question next week. Now we need our justification because we've got the answer. We've said the most important thing. I'm still not that excited. And remember, I'm looking for 4 marks out of 12 from this. At the moment, I'm not getting 4 marks. What? Oh, it's that word again. Without. Without this improved perception, straight back to the question, M&S might struggle to attract fashion-conscious consumers, potentially losing market share to competitors like Next. Thought I'd drop phrases in this time. In the future, future-orientated mops to do with the market. Okay? It's not hard to write. They've attracted people because of the improved perception. Without it, they might not have attracted them. Quite an easy argument, really. And it is a little bit more. But more importantly, is it perfect or is it level 4? So I'm not after perfection. You shouldn't be either. You should be able to finish this in 15 minutes. That includes drawing the diagram and finding everything else. And is it level 4? Well, I'm not going to go through all of them, but clearly, thorough throughout every paragraph, including the conclusion and my justification. Yes, we're sort of looking for 5 chains of argument. It's not the number, it's what you do with them. And because of the way that I've said this is seen in the statement, that adds another one. It's probably around about 5 there, and if you can't count up to 5 in the first bit, then have a look at the however. We'll be fine. So we've got that. Wide ranging is more than 2. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly 5. That's definitely more than 2 last time I checked. Everything's well contextualized. Thank you for asking the question twice. Have we used any quantitative stuff? There's a bit in there. We've not done any cheeky maths, but never mind. We've used it. Qualitative, loads of, and leading to a supported judgment. And this is the bit where students tend to lose marks because all they do is repeat themselves. And unfortunately, a common mistake is they get here, they're very excited, they've forgotten what the question is, and then they answer a totally different question. Overall, I recommend Marks and Spencer's should sell more cheese. Okay? Probably not going to help your marks. Quickly go back, reread what the hook is, and then write your conclusion directly answering the question. Hopefully that was useful. I know it's a long video. Go and have a look at all the other videos that are out there. There's loads of stuff from Tutor to You, 2 Teachers, and others that are out there as well. You've got loads of stuff. More importantly, go and read the news, see what's going on now. That's your mops. Have a good day.